Left Edmonton, it rained for a whole week, day and night, and we didn't see the sun, but this spring we hardly saw any sun. And now I don't know what I was supposed to say.
Something about the weather?
Oh yes, and in Edmonton, well, we had just, a steady rain, but out north around Slave Lake and some other places that it just poured rain, and the soil was wet from the winter, and they're flooded. When they showed, what they take the picture from the air, the houses are just little islands. It's all water, and they had to evacuate a lot of people. And when they go back, they don't know when that water will dry up. In Edmonton, they said if it rained a little longer, they could have had some flooded basements, but they didn't so far.
Did it used to flood? I mean, has it flooded in the past?
It did, and even in the same area, but a few years back, I think it was in '88. But in around Winnipeg, they had so much snow, and when it got a little bit warmer, the snow was melting fast, turning into water, and the rivers and lakes were all frozen solid, and it just went over. And a lot of places were flooded around Winnipeg, around the Red River and the Assiniboine River. They had a bad flood. We in Edmonton, so far, we were fortunate that we didn't have a flood.
That's good.
All we need now is good sunshine, because nothing grows and when I saw even from the plane, a lot of fields in around Edmonton, the grain is underwater. And if it sits for a few days, then it's gone.
Yeah.
It'll rot.
Yeah. Did that ever happen when you had the farm?
No, we didn't. Well, it was the time before my husband went to the sand, we had two weeks of heavy rain, and from our farm to town of Dauphin was 20 miles. And in between there were 3 rivers, good-sized rivers. There was Valley River, Vermilion River, and Wilson River. And they were, a few miles apart. They overflowed. The 20 miles was a lake.
Wow.
You couldn't go on the highway or anything. Some of the highways were, washed off. And after that, just when the rain went down, we had to have a sale on our farm because my husband was going to the sanitarium.
Now, you say the sanitarium? You mean the sanitarium?
Sanitarium.
Yeah, okay.
You better correct me because I mix up.
Uh-huh.
And who makes a sale in July when people don't have money?
Right.
The sales are always in the fall when people, have sell their grain, and they have. And everything was just sacrificed. We could have had twice as much, from what, and we sold everything. When the auctioneer, came up, he was a friend of Grandpa's, and he gave a speech. He says, people were gathered here not just for a profit or for a bargain, but he says this is a unusual case. This man is leaving his home. He says, be generous, do the best for him. And everything went, and it was so hard for him to give the keys to his car. He only had that car 1 year. And another strange thing, when the water was, when the rain was raining all that time, he fenced part of his field for a pasture, before it was supposed to be plowed. And he let the horses in, and they went on the other end of the farm because there were a few bushes there to hide from the rain. He was too sick to go and bring them home, and they were chilled there. And then if horses don't work for about a week or so, they don't want to get into the barn. They think, well, we're not going to get into the barn anymore. And the day of the sale, My brother Steve was in the Air Force, and he came to our place, and his nephews. And he says, "You go, boys, bring those horses in, because you're gonna have a hard time putting them in the barn." So they went, and they rounded up the horses. Of course, the creek was overflow, and we had a well, and my husband sat on the well, and those horses went first, took a drink of water from the creek. Here we were expecting that they'd be frolicking, not wanting to go to the barn. They went just like soldiers, one by one, came to him and gave his head like this, and he scratched it on the forehead, just like they were saying goodbye to him. I was in the house crying my heart out.
It seemed like they knew he was going.
Yeah, the animals know that.
Wow.
Everyone, there was 8 or 9 horses. They all went by on the line, just came and put their head down. He scratched them, they went into the barn.
Now he went to a sanitarium. Did you visit him a lot there?
During those 2 years, I made 15 trips. It was 200 miles away. And in summertime, we had the summers hot like you have up here. And they were old-fashioned buses, like school buses. And it was hot. Oh, it was terrible. But that's all I could do, visit him once in a while.
But you wrote him.
I wrote him once or twice a week. And then, when the letters stopped coming, I would run to the post office, nothing in the mail, and then just hits me. No more mail. And a week before he passed away, I think I had a letter that they kind of advised me that he was going low. And I told the family, I said, I have to go if they want, because I went by buses myself. And my husband's sister and her husband and a brother and his wife, they said that they're going to go together and take me. And we came, and there was a little town, like in a valley, and then there was a kind of a little mountain, and beside that mountain there was a big lake. And between the lake and the mountain, they had this sanitarium buildings, like the buildings, the hospital.
Yeah.
There were wards for women, wards for men, separate. And there was rooming houses in town, because when I came alone, I stayed at one place. In fact, yeah. And we went to this one rooming house. They said they have a room for 2 beds, but they couldn't put 5 people in. So it meant that I had to sleep someplace else. And her neighbor said, well, I had a bed. And we went to see him, and he was very, very weak, Me being alone in a strange town, strange house, and here they're together. They couldn't arrange to have somebody come and stay where I did. Mm-hmm. What a night it was. Then we went visit the next day, and the doctors came to me and the nurse, and they said, we have visiting rooms, and you stay in the hospital and visit with your husband as long as you can. I told my husband, and he said, no way, I don't want to, and you better get home, there's a kid. He got so upset that I couldn't force him, So I said, if that's it, and I said, well, I'll come next week, and he says, if you like. And I told the others, I said, I want a minute alone with him. And I don't know where I got the courage, but I never talked to him before, and I never prayed in public before. But, I just said a prayer, said, Lord, you're separating us for a while, but you will unite us in the future. And maybe said some more. And when I finished and I looked at his life, his face was so bright, you know. He was so, I don't know, I can't explain, so content, you know. And I went home, and that week, you know, there was my brother was stationed in Edmonton. He was still in the Air Force, and he got a leave from the Air Force, and he wanted to let me go know that he's coming, and he wanted to go and see my husband in the cemetery. And those days they had telegram girls coming around, you know, bring telegrams. And I saw this girl with a telegram, and I thought, oh. I started to cry before she came in. She says, what's the matter? And I told her what I was expecting, and she said, no, it's a telegram from Edmonton, your brother is coming. Well, that kind of, you know, helped me. And anyway, I made up my mind. He was coming on Saturday, and I left on Friday afternoon. There was a bus leaving afternoon in Dauphin. Somehow I phoned to the senator, and they said that he was the same. But they were glad that they were coming, and they will be looking for me. So I had lunch, and I came to the bus depot, got my ticket. And when I was getting on the bus, you know, I had such a tight feeling in my heart that I didn't know what to do with myself. And I sat on the bus, and the lady that's sitting beside me wanted to carry some conversation. And I just turned around to the window, and I couldn't. And it lasted maybe half an hour like that, because we stopped shortly for something, you know. And all of a sudden that feeling went down. And I turned out to that lady, and I said, well, I was kind of rude, but I said, I don't know what happened to me. But I told her where I was going and why, and, you know, she was sympathetic with me. And after that, I was just feeling, I hope this bus goes faster. I want to get there. You know, I was just on that edge. I arrived at that cemetery by, you know, the place where they park. And there was a nurse standing in nurse's uniform. And some lady got off, started to talk to her, and she told her to get, because she was looking for somebody else. And she came to me, she says, you wouldn't be Mrs. Derhak? And I said, yes. And she says, well, I'm supposed to meet you, and we have a room ready for you. And we started to walk, and I said, well, was there any changes? And she says, oh, we'll talk when we get there, you know. And that gave me a message, but I didn't say anything. Till we come to this inside, and she took me to this room. And when we got in, and I turned around to her, and I said, well, it sounds that I'm too late. And she says, yeah. He was, his last half hour of his life that I felt he was going. You know, when he was finished, I was relieved. And how do I know? Because when she said that he is gone, and she says, do you want to go and see the body? And I said, you know, I think I better save myself. It will be too much for me. And she says, it's a wise thing that you're saying. But she says, you know, there are a few things we have to settle. Come to my office. And I came to the office, and on the table was a book. And I could see in the corner was his name. And there were, you know, a chart like 8 o'clock, breathing a little bit, 10 o'clock, you know, the chart, how he was doing that day. When it came to 12 o'clock, it said he coughed. And then he said that he moaned. And then it's quiet, and at 12:30, he was gone. And the nurse didn't know that I read that.
And you got on the bus at 12.
And I got on bus at 12. Anyway, she came back, and she says, well, she says, we knew you were on the road, and we didn't send any telegrams or said what you're going to do. And you know, I just told myself I need all the strength. And I said, get a place Garland and his sister and brother-in-law, the post office and then the telephone was in a local store that all the people were there getting the mail, and I knew that they would be there. I said, you get this place and ask for Max Fiduk. And she did, and she got them. She said, there's somebody on the phone, and I started to talk to him. I said, I'm in Nyanet in the sanitarium. Bill is gone. And I said, you send Mary, his wife, on the morning train to go and stay with the children and tell them, because, they didn't know yet. And let all the family know, and I'll be sometimes an afternoon home, the following day. He got the message. He turned around to his wife and he says, I can't understand this. This was Victoria talking to me if nothing happened. She just gave me orders. He couldn't get over it. And then he says, well, how are you going to arrange the funeral? He says, we have a cemetery here, we can bury here, or you can want to Dauphin. I said, no, I want him to Dauphin. And then the pages flashed Dauphin, and I said, get me Bulmer's funeral home. And, and I said, I gave them, the orders to come and pick up the body, and, he said that he'll come, And then the next morning they said that he phoned, if I had only one way ticket to wait for him, then I would have a free ride. And I had a, return ticket, and I said, no, I'll go home. So it's just like a dream. I don't remember, what happened. I had breakfast, and I went to the office, and I wanted to thank the people that look after him. I told this nurse, I want to thank you all for looking after my husband. And she says, Mrs. Derhak, there is nothing to thank for, because if he was a patient that would ask once for a glass of water, that would be service for him. But he never complained, he never asked for anything. We never had a patient like him. And I think of Vernon in this way.
Yeah.
So I got on the bus, and then I was wondering whether when Paul came, I left at noon, and Paul was coming at midnight. And he was going to take a bus to this place to see, Bill. And I wondered if he did get on the bus. Now, there was a certain place that the buses from Dauphin and from this place, they met. And I said to the driver on this bus, I said, when you meet this other bus, I want to get off and see if there's an airman, on the bus going. And he just went and he looked at me, such an ugly look. So I just got off the bus and I went around and I looked, and there was no airman, Paul wasn't there. And I came home and I got off the bus, and it was something that it was a long weekend or something, and there were more people, and they put an extra bus that I wasn't on the regular bus. I was on another one next after that one. My brother came to the bus depot, and I did get off the bus, and he thought, well, she's coming some other way. And he went home. But when I got off the bus, and here I saw a lady that I didn't see her for a few years, and we went to school, we were like twins, and she says, oh, Victoria. And I just glared for her, I couldn't speak. And she didn't know what was wrong with me, Anyway, I called a cab, and here I had my suitcases and the suitcase that he had there, his belongings. And the cab brought me in front of my house, and here are people, in the house, I could see his both sisters, some of them crying and looking. Nobody comes out to help me. And my brother is there, sometimes I got out of the cab and I can't move. And I just put the suitcase down And I dragged myself to the house, and then everybody crying and that. So, you know, I went through a lot of things. And I'll add on that I had experience with another lady that was my sister-in-law's, like Paul's wife's sister. Her husband died when was only 35, and she had one child. And of course it was kind of related to us through her, through my sister-in-law. And I took some leave from Manning's, you know, to go to that funeral. And at the cemetery, my brother and his wife, they took the mother and they're leading her away. And there's a group leading, and that widow is standing alone at the grave and just swaying. And I came and I hold her, you know, got hold of her, but I feel that she's going to pull me down. And the attendant says, well, do you need help? And it was his job to look after that woman. And I said, I sure do. I said, where are you? So he came and grabbed her and led her to the car, and the family didn't know that this happened.
Wow.
And that's my experience.
Now, did you have a funeral for Granddad?
Oh, yes. And you know, another thing, my Morley, he was working in the press after school, and on the Saturday morning, setting the print, you know, or taking it, setting or taking apart, I don't know which. Anyway, the funeral man, the owner, he had his brother-in-law as a partner, and this his partner was Mr. Oh, just to say McGuire or something. And anyway, he was a bandmaster, and Morley was in a band, you know, and you know, they were so close. And Morley is going to this place to work, you know, Duff and Harold, McMurray. And Mr. McMurray is going to the funeral home to take a hearse to go and pick up the body. And oh, he kicked himself. Being in a funeral home so long, stopping this kid, he says, oh, you're a Derhak. You know, I'm supposed to pick a body in Unedited, Derhak. What is it? It's my dad.
Oh, man.
Oh, and you know what that brought on? That he went and picked up the body, and then I went with Paul, and Paul used to work in Winnipeg as a cabinet maker, you know, but then he got a job making coffins, you know. And I wanted to pick a coffin myself, and in fact he was lifting at the foot up and looking at the numbers, and this Mr. Bulmer says, what are you looking for? And he says, well, I'm looking for the numbers. I know what grade they are, you know, the higher ones and that. But after the funeral, my brother says, well, I stayed longer than I was supposed to, you know, extra leave. And he says, I need an affidavit why I stayed. Well, you know, and I said, well, Mr. Bulmer, the director, would be the best one to sign for you. And I said, and I'm going to go and pay for that coffin, because, you know, I had money from. So we came there, and well, he was very nice to me and that. And when my brother said what he wanted, an affidavit, he says, well, I can made an affidavit whether you're alive or dead. He said, I can do both. So he said, and then to me, he says, instead of giving you a receipt, I could give you a death certificate, because it might be handy for you. You might be applying for a widow's allowance or something. So he gave me a death certificate, which you have to pay extra if you want one. I took that as a receipt in an envelope, and I put away, and I know I paid maybe $120, and then when I could think about it, I thought, well, how much did he charge the trip 200 miles and serving the funeral and that. And I looked at there was nothing but the coffin. Everything was free for me.
Wow.
That man felt so bad that he made such a goof, stopping morally.
Yeah.
Because he admitted after, he says, I should have known better, getting around if you know somebody, And he just point blank says, do you know a Derhak? And
Wow.
And after that, there was my husband's, this brother-in-law died, she was left alone. And she had family. Well, her son was in Montreal. I did all the phoning. I did everything that was, and he named me a woman with a big heart. Now, I had experience like this. Then another lady, she had 4 sons in the army. They all came back. One was wounded, one was a prisoner, a German, he had a tough time, but they all came back. And they went to work in Ontario. And I don't know, the middle one, they were building big grain elevators in, what was it? What they call it? Fort William, on the state's border, on St. Lawrence River. And he fell off a scaffold and got killed. Here she was planning to go and visit him. She even sold her house or rent, I forget now, and she was staying in my place. Well, when she needed help, who was going to help? But she asked to go to another funeral home because that owner was a major in a squadron where her son served, she wanted him. So I went to him and I got acquainted with him. And he called me a lady with big shoulders. I could have worked in a funeral home.
Wow. How did your children find out that he had passed away?
Well, his the auntie came when I told him on the phone. When she came, she told him.
She's the one that told him then.
Yeah, but she when she came, got off the train. It was early in the morning. When she came to the house, Morley left already. Morley wasn't in the house.
Morley didn't hear.
So Morley didn't hear.
That's why he
He heard it from the funeral director.
Yeah.
And how did my dad react to this? Do you remember? Because he doesn't remember any of this.
Well, he was too young.
Yeah, but do you remember how he reacted?
Kids are kids. You can't talk to them while maybe I should have, but nobody did. And they just look around and whatever they remember. What happened to Nancy when we went to the funeral home to view and I should have known better to hold her by the hand. But she knew it was dead, and she just ran and stuck her head in the coffin. And when she saw he was so different, she screamed, and jumped back, which was wrong. So she remembers that. Yeah, I have a few pictures, at the graveyard. And I picked up pallbearers like his 3 nephews were, or 2 were in the forces, 2 of them overseas. And my 2 brothers were in the Air Force overseas, so there were 4 of them. And then there were 2 other nephews, so that made 6. But these 4 were in uniforms, and those 2 were in civilian, in the picture. But you know those Solomons that stayed at your place from Duffy?
Yeah.
When Mrs. Solomon died, she had 6 grandsons, all Solomons as pallbearers.
Wow.
That was nice. 6 grandsons. And all Solomons, mind you.
Wow.
And when the old man died last winter, I went to the funeral. I don't know, some of the grandsons were missing, the granddaughters took place.
Wow.
That was the first time I saw, girls being pallbearers.
So they were carrying the coffin too?
Yeah.
Wow. Hmm. So then you moved to the city.
Well, I moved out that same fall when Dad went to the cemetery.
When he got sick, that's when you moved to the city.
Yeah. And I went and bought this house. He went to this, and a month later, I got the house. And I was thinking, now how am I going to move? But my brother was on leave from Air Force. And it was hard for farmers, getting help. And he says to me, I'll go across the road and I'll help them with stooking whatever they're doing. And I'll ask them I don't want any money that they pay me, that they donate their truck and we bring it in the yard and you pack and put everything, and we'll put everything in the truck, and in the evening we'll take one load and the next day we'll take another load. And it was in August and I started canning, carrots and beans. I had some already canned and some on the stove. And that one afternoon I had all the cupboards empty and all the sealers out of the cellar. But the vegetables were still warm. They spoiled. It was too fresh to pack.
Mm.
And I did that packing, and the next day, and we moved. Oh. Of course, Morley started to go to high school. I was pushing on account of him. I wanted him to go to high school. He took grade 9 and 10 and part of 11, and he quit. And his Nancy's husband, now his brother-in-law, did the same. He was in the same class. Of course, Morley, he took some courses that he, finished his grade 12, grade 11 or whatever.
Wow. Huh.
Oh.
But you had these two little twins that were always getting into trouble, or did they stay out of trouble for the most part?
Shovel what?
Trouble.
Travel.
Trouble. Did my dad and Vern get in a lot of trouble? Or were they good kids?
Well, they were kids. There were some, but it wasn't exactly all their fault. But your dad got into masses because he was Vic. Vernon was always following whatever your dad did. Your dad was the leader.
My dad was the leader.
Yeah, he was he thought he knew everything, and Vernon would correct him. He says, "Where's your brains? Why don't you think?" And they spoke Ukrainian, both of them, but he twisted words backwards. He would say something that sounded backwards, like there was a radio station, CKY, and he would say why CK. There were a few things that you twisted. And then in Ukrainian we said wheat, pshenicya, and he would say shpenicya. No, and he would say something different. And Vernon says, "You're saying wrong, say shpenicya," and he was saying it wrong. And he was correcting Vic.
That's funny.
Now you asked Dad to tell the stories about himself. You sit down here and tell the stories.
He doesn't remember any. He claims he
What
doesn't
happened
remember.
with that book that you read, Rasputin?
So he doesn't. He says.
Are
he
you
doesn't
ashamed of that? What happened to you?
What? What happened?
No, you better say it. And it's interesting for the kids. You have nothing to be ashamed of. It wasn't your fault.
He claims he doesn't remember these stories.
Sure he remembers.
Well, go ahead and tell.
No. No, this is the time that you should tell him.
I'm tired.
Oh, don't talk. He was such a bookworm that he was taking books from the library and reading them, and and in fact, he won like you would say award because he was poor in his what was it? What grade you were poor?
Well, in grade 8 in junior high school, at the beginning of the year, I had real poor grades because I was always sick. And I decided to work hard, and I got some of the highest marks. So at the end of the year, when we have a big auditorium meeting, I got an award for the greatest improvement
Wow.
Wow.
in junior high.
And I'll add something to it that maybe he doesn't know. Yes, he was sick, but I wouldn't call him lazy, but he thought, kind of careless. It'll come up. Vernon will come home, do his homework, and be fine. And I said, oh yeah, I'll do it, or I know it. I did it at school, or something. Like excuses. But Melnychuk was the principal?
No, it was.
Melnychuk was your class teacher.
He was the English teacher.
Well, anyway, I forget which were the teachers.
Mr. Smith, I think, was
No, it wasn't
Smart.
Smith.
Mr. Smart was the principal.
It was that big fellow, or
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, when I was visiting the teachers, and I said, Vic, he's lazy, he's careless. And I said, when they were in the same grade, in the same room, there was a competition because he wanted to keep up to Vernon. But now Vernon is one grade ahead, and he's one grade behind. He doesn't care. And he says, well, it's a good thing that I know that. We'll boost him up. So I don't know what they did to him, but all he needed is just, say that you, and I told him, I said, I'm ashamed of you because I know you can do the better. And he said, they're going to see. No, I said that the teacher said, he said, I'm going to show him. And he started, studying. And since he was so low and he made such a good marks, that the trustees and the teachers got together and they say, we always award the smart kids, But this one made a record that he was so low and he made such a big improvement.
That's good.
So what he got? He got $10 award, I think.
I don't know.
Vernon didn't have to write exam because he had over 70, or And here this one comes, I got $10, I'm going to the store and buy a pair of pants. And Vernon says, what's the use of being smart when the dumb ones get the reward? Well, I went and I pulled out this $10 that I couldn't afford and gave to Vernon. And I said, you go and buy yourself a pair of pants too. Because
Wow. So this was when, how old were they?
That was junior high school.
And you know what my punishment was?
12.
When they were, in June, they're going to write exams. And they were so hard on those sneakers, well, we called them running shoes in those days. Well, they were delivering papers and that. And every month or so, I had to buy a new shoe. And they want to throw them in the garbage, or I used to burn them. And I said, no, you're not destroying your... There was a box in the pantry, put them in the box. They didn't know why, but I told them that. But one day I said, look, I'm waiting for your exams. If you pass, fine, we're going to get new shoes. But if you're taking the grade over again, you're going to wear those shoes over again. And the guys believed me. And Vernon called his Uncle Max and he says, Uncle Max, come on and see these shoes. These are Vic's, and I know he's going to wear them again. But I'm not. I know I will.
I don't even.
That was my philosophy. That's enough.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know any of this stuff about him at all. Was there a lot of competition between him and Vern growing up? Because they were the same age.
They were the same age. There wasn't, I forget now, but there was in different days. You remember when you was at my birthday when I brought that subject about the beer? And it was Fred that bought you, and Fred's face turned red as a meat.
No, he doesn't remember. See, he doesn't. I asked him, do you remember your childhood? And he says, I don't remember much. He doesn't really say anything. So
But when you don't think about it, see?
yeah.
Well, you know, they were going, preparing to go to graduation,
When
you
get
know, I
older,
don't know
think if I
what
sat down when I get old, I could probably read the You gotta get your mind get thinking.
whether it was grade 10 or I don't know what grade, but anyway. And they wanted, I don't know, some kind of part. They wanted beer. But I had a shed for coal, you know, at the back of the back lane. And I usually had it locked, but it wasn't locked, and I looked at it, and I thought there was some coal even missing. But I looked in the corner, there was a case of beer. And I thought, well, I'll lock it. And I thought this way, if I lock it and it's my boys put it there, they know where the key is and they'll take it. And if it was neighbors' boys, it's going to stay there. And I locked the shack and they got it. But I'm not questioning anything. And I tell you, my boys are so good. They come from school. You need the grass cotton, and you need to go do this. They're just as good as gold. And I'm not asking any question. But maybe a week later or so, and I said, I don't know, there's some kind of a bootlegger in this town that he buys beer for kids. I wonder who it is. Oh, you'll never find out. And I didn't question further. I didn't know till I brought it out at my birthday party, and it was Fred, their brother-in-law, and you turned red as a beet.
Nancy, Fred, you put the beer in there.
Well, I don't think they got drunk or anything, but it was just fun.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And another thing, you tell them how you started smoking.
Started what?
When you started smoking.
Smoking.
Oh, yeah.
How old was he when he started smoking?
Well, I was in
Grade 7.
I was about 13 years old. Well, you know, when you go the first day junior high school, you really think you're a big shot.
Right.
And so we went to school during the day. Then at noon, we used to go home for dinner. Well, at noon, we went behind this building on the corner of the school, junior high school, and these guys lit up these cigarettes and giving it to all us guys, you know, the bigger guys. So, we was big shots, man. We was smoking behind, and then we walked down the road. And guess who come up the road?
My mom.
He says, just wait till you get home.
So you caught him with his first cigarette.
Yeah.
Well, I saw that you thought the school was on fire because there was smoke behind them. And I was babysitting one lady's kid because the girl, first day of school, and she had to work. And the girl came in, I said, can I leave now? And she says, yes. And I went, shortcut and, met them face to face. And, the other kids went, and I preaching all, and, and crying. And, he was so small, because he was sick when he was young. And starting to smoke, it broke my heart.
Yeah.
We came into the house, and I don't know what made me think, but I think it was some Lord's supervision for me. I took a piece of paper and pen and I said, I want you to write all the guys that were behind that shack. So he wrote them, there were about 6 or 7. I said, oh, how about yours? Well, he signed his name. And I folded that piece of paper and I went and put it in my purse. Now he didn't know what I was going to do with that. I didn't know myself. And then I thought, well, I'll go and tell the principal, well, he'll punish him, but he wouldn't punish the others because, it's my complaint. And I thought, well, I don't want my kid to be just, So it stayed in my purse and I forgot about it. But he had such a doubt that he was sure that the principal has it, and he knows me that I play tricks, that I don't say anything, and he didn't know what was going on, and I'm sure he wasn't smoking. And the principal, he was over 6 foot tall, big man.
That
And
was
if
Mr.
there was
Slobodin.
any
That was Mr. Slobodin.
yeah, if there was any complaint, they sent him to the office. He just picked the kid and dropped him.
Boy, he was a big.
That was it. Anyway, this guy is in grade 10 or 11, in high school already. Yeah, but Vernon was in Edmonton already, and he was alone. And he's smoking, private, because I said, well, if you smoke, it's your bad, responsibility. But there was something, this principal was canvassing that he was going house to house. And Vic has got his radio turned on and his feet on the chair and smoking. But there's a knock at the door, and Vic goes to see who it is. And you open the door, and you put the cigarette behind. Mom, there's Mr. Slavonian at the door. Oh, I almost killed myself laughing. And after that, I don't know how he quit.
So he hid.
Huh?
He hid a cigarette behind his back.
Yeah. He was still guilty, in the eyes of Mr. Slavonian, the principal, but he never knew anything about the smoke, but he was the guilty one.
That's funny.
You wondering how I quit smoking?
Huh? No.
Well, Vern, remember he got real sick and he quit smoking?
Well, I don't know how
In
you
Edmonton.
started now. You
In
quit.
Edmonton, he quit smoking. Remember he?
No, he was smoking when he got married.
Yeah, I know, but after he got married, he was taking drugs and then,
Oh, yeah, I know
and
that.
then he quit smoking too.
Oh, yeah, he had to.
Yeah, because he quit drinking, and he decided that he'd have to quit smoking because when you smoke, you have to have a drink because your throat gets dry. See? Well, anyhow.
But
mission-
how did you quit
Well,
smoking?
that's what I'm going to tell you. These missionaries come to the store in Victoria. There was a Mormon lady working in the store, and she introduced me to these two missionaries, like the one you saw today.
Yeah.
And they said, let's go golfing on your day off. And I had Wednesday afternoon off. So we went golfing, and after we finished golfing, they said, why don't you come up to our apartment and we can have some supper, and maybe we can talk a little bit of religion. I says, that's fine with me. I says, my mother's a real good woman, and she always wants me to know a little bit about religion. So they gave me the first discussion. And they said, they had a little flannel board, and they showed the 12 apostles in the old days. And underneath there, they have a little strip, and that's the foundation of the church, is the 12 apostles. And then if you take the foundation of the church away, what happens to the apostles? They fall down. They're all killed. Then you don't have no more church, no more true church. And I agreed with them. I thought, that's a good idea. You need 12 apostles. And they said, well, we have 12 apostles in our church, and we have a prophet. And they just give me the first discussion, and they give me just a simple lesson, and I knew what they were saying was true. And so I got transferred from Victoria back to Vancouver, and I forgot all about the church. And I was there all winter, and in the spring, these two missionaries come in the store. And they asked me, see, this old lady, she referred these missionaries to me. And they asked if I would like to finish the lessons. And I said, sure. So I finished the lessons, and before I finished the lessons, they told me that if I was to be baptized, I had to quit smoking. And I says, that's the hardest thing I could ever do. I says, I've been smoking since I'm 13. Here I'm almost 22 years old. I can't quit smoking. He grabbed me in the shoulder, he looked me right in the eye. He says, I know you can quit smoking.
Sure.
He says, cut down a little bit each day and then quit. So I took the cigarettes, and I only put 3 cigarettes in there for the whole day. I had one in the morning, and one at noon, and one in the evening. And then I did that for almost
Is he
a
on
week.
video?
Yeah. And then I went to a movie on Friday night. And it was that show about Apple, 34th Street.
Miracle on 34th Street.
Something. Anyhow, after the show, I walked up the theater and the stars were out, beautiful, and I lit up a cigarette. And I thought, I says, God, if you're in heaven, I says, I'm going to throw the cigarette down. And I stamped on it and I says, God, I will never smoke again. And that was the last cigarette I ever had.
Good for you.
But it was hard. It was hard.
Well, it wasn't, I don't think it
'Cause
was
it's a
in.
bad habit. In fact, right now, we was talking tonight, this guy, him and his wife, we went home teaching over at his house. He's got a son that smokes, and he's a member of the church. And he says they put drugs in the cigarettes now, and it's
Sure.
even harder for people to quit
Oh,
smoking
yeah,
now
yeah.
than when I smoked.
Oh, harder. But you know, Polly, she was such a hard smoker. And you know, I think it was the money, the cigarettes were getting, you know, a higher price. And she tried, several times. She wouldn't smoke for a few, months and then start again. But she tried to quit when Vernon went to Nancy's for the Ray's funeral. And she said she was alone and, you know, being kind of upset about Vernon going there. And she says, there's no cigarettes in the house. And she says, well, I had to get out in the car and go and drive. And I thought, well, I won't drive. And since there was none, and she made herself not go. And the next morning she didn't crave so much, and then she quit. And she came to my place and she says, I haven't been smoking for 3 months. And I said, I'm so happy, I'm so glad that I'm going to award you for that. And I went and I had $100 bill. And I said, look, Polly, I'm giving you this $100 bill for awarding you for quit smoking. But in case I find out that you started again, I want $200 back. And she was holding that payment, thinking, I'm taking it. And Vern says, but I don't have to pay. I said, I'm not making any deal with you. She kept it because she has to give me $200.
You know how
And
bad,
she stopped? Did she stop?
You know how bad that smoking was? I would not have breakfast. I would have a cigarette and a cup of coffee.
Oh yeah, that's
at
what they
work,
do?
And work till noon. And then at noon, if I was so busy, I would have another cup of coffee and a cigarette at the counter. Just enough time to do that. And then I would go back to work on the sales floor. And I wouldn't hardly eat. I could live on cigarettes and coffee.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. And I was real skinny and tired. I was always tired. I would work all day long, and then I work in the evening in the store down in the basement and help out with the shipping. Clean up the basement for sales and bring stuff up and put it on the sales, or work in the windows for displays. I worked really hard.
Oh.
I worked from stock boy to assistant manager. I finally became manager of the store, my own store.
Wow.
But that smoking was really hard on me.
Yeah.
And I was always coughing in the morning. I could, when I woke up in the morning, I'd have mucus in my mouth. Like, I would stink. It was a terrible, terrible thing, that smoking.
Now, did
But
Polly,
it would just get a hold of you.
did Polly actually quit?
Oh yeah, when she quit, she never started.
So
But look, she goes to play bingo, and the worst place is that hall where they play bingo. In Westmount, they had it on the west side where the buses stop. The entrance was from there. And you didn't even know in the mall that there was a bingo store. Hall. They went and moved it inside the mall, next to Safeway. Before you go up to the Safeway, that smoke just hits you.
yeah.
Oh, so terrible.
Now, she still doesn't smoke?
No.
Wow.
Yeah, that's incredible. And and she couldn't quit swearing. When at the funeral, before they closed the coffin, just the family were there.
Now, you mean Ray or you mean Melvin?
Melvin.
Melvin.
And I said to Polly, Polly, all that matters is that you forget about that bitterness, that harshness that you're carrying on. I said, just look at that coffin and say to yourself and throw it in before they close the coffin, that it goes down away from you. Yes, Mother, I'll try. I said, no, do it right now. Now, she's admitting that I gave her the best, advice. But
And she didn't.
and she didn't. And I told her, I said, look, Vernon got over his sickness. He's a different man. You'll have a different husband. Well, I see that he's different. Oh, maybe it's the pills that he's taking now.
Well, no, you know what she keeps saying? She says that Nancy talked Vern into taking her pills, and the reason Vern has changed is because he's on a different kind of pill.
Well,
That's
is
the
that
only
bad?
That's the only reason he's changed.
Well, is that bad?
Well, I don't know, but that's what she says.
Well,
It's
it-
true. It's true.
It's not so much that he's changed; he's gotten better.
It's getting better.
He's healed.
If the doctor, she told Vernon, her doctor, she talked with her doctor about her brother, and she says, when they did such a good thing for me, what they do for him? And he says, well, tell him to tell his brother.
Hey,
But
how
he
come
says,
you turn the
your
phone off?
brother and sister, you might have something in common.
You mean chemical depression or something like
Yeah.
that? Uh-huh.
And if it helped, well, she should be happy for it.
Yeah?
What's wrong? What wrong did Nancy do?
No, she helped him.
She helped him.
Yeah.
Well, she says that he's changed so much that he's not the same.
But he's not the same, and thank God he isn't. You better close that. That's enough. You're
Yeah.
running too much electricity.
Oh no, it's fine. Is there a lot of depression in the family? Do you think this is something maybe genetic? Or did you have any aunts or uncles that were depressed, or
No, if there is, it's on Derhak's side.
it's on the Derhak
On
side?
this side, because Dad, there were things that I don't know. I couldn't even explain now that he would be, I don't know if he was angry, depressed, he'd be talking, but it was just like through your teeth, you know what I mean. And then he'll get over it, so it must be
Now, how did you meet Granddad?
through his sister.
Through his sister. And how old were you? You got married fairly early, young.
I was 16,
You were 16. And how old was he?
and he was 26. He
He
was
was
10.
26, so he was 10 years older than you.
Yeah,
Is that right?
And you met through his sister.
through his sister.
Oh.
Well, they used to get married younger in those days, didn't they?
Well, it was during Depression, and my mother said, "Oh, I just hate you to go out to work and all that." And some of my girlfriends says, "Get married and you don't have to work." So, at that age, I thought that was the best way out.
Now, you said yesterday that you had a short courtship. You weren't engaged very
No,
long.
I don't want to talk about that.
But you did mention it yesterday.
Well, I mentioned that's enough.
Okay.
What did you like about him?
Well, I don't know. I was so fond of his sister, Mrs. Fiduk, Auntie Fiduk.
Oh, they were nice. Weren't
Oh, and I don't know. And he was a handsome man.
they? Now, where did they live? Auntie Fiduk and Uncle Max.
They lived in Ranver, north of Cowan.
Oh, north of town.
Yeah, he was a section foreman.
Where-
He worked up there.
Where did you?
Well, he was a good man at Uncle Max.
Oh, who was it?
Where did you two get married?
Where?
Where?
At our house, but my parents were Orthodox, and the Orthodox priest came to the house.
So you were married by an Orthodox priest.
Yeah.
That's nice. How is my dad like him? What traits does my father have
You mean
that your husband had? How is he like his father?
Well, I'm a hard worker, and he was a hard worker. He worked hard on the farm.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. He takes more after his uncle, my husband, his grandfather's brother, Steve Derhak. You take a lot after him.
So he's a lot more like Uncle Steve.
Yeah, on
His
the
Uncle
Derhak
Steve.
side.
Right.
Because even Uncle Steve, my brother, says the same thing. And Vernon took a lot out like his father.
So my father doesn't remind you a lot of your husband.
No, Vernon does.
Vern does.
Vernon does.
And so he's more, does he remind you of you a little bit? Do you see any part of yourself in my father?
Oh yeah, sure.
Would you say that he's more like you than he's like your husband?
No, because how we got along with my husband, we had the same, being everything perfect and that. And he isn't. Well, maybe he is now, but he wasn't, and he was more like his Uncle Steve.
What do you mean? You mean he wasn't a perfectionist. He didn't.
No. When I look at this garage now, I'm shocked. Now, was it your boys' work in that garage?
No, he did that garage. But he wasn't like that before?
No.
He wasn't organized? Or...
No. There was two personalities in him, because in the store he was perfect, but at home he wasn't.
Huh. Well, like you said before, at school, if he really applied himself...
Yeah, if he tried, he did it. But you'd have to push him or trick him into it, like I did.
What do you mean trick him?
Well, like, I went and told the teacher all about him, and then the teacher knew all.
Oh.
And when that's Feduk died, and the teacher that was teaching him, he was selling the monuments, the markers. And his auntie always came to my place, so he could find her there, to sell the marker to her. And, he sat and she did, he took the order. But Vic was out, like boys are, and he came in and he saw this Mr. Hnatiuk, and he was puzzled why he came. And he says, well, what did that Hnatiuk want? And I said, boy, did I ever learn a lot of things from school. And he says, it must have been that dame that sits in front of me. Told him. And I laughed, and the next day I'm coming out of the post office, and Mr. Hnatiuk, we met, and I said, Mr. Hnatiuk, what happened last night after you left? And Vic was wondering why you came to my house, and I said, I learned a lot of things, and he says, must be that dame in the front, and he says, I should visit you a lot often, we'll find out something. The guilty.
Now, what about Vern? Did he get in trouble at school at all?
No, not as much as he did. He did in one that I was suspicious, and that was a serious thing. On Halloween when they go and do crazy things?
Yeah.
And I think he was in that bunch. I'm sure that he maybe didn't do the things, but
Vern was with the big gang.
He was with the bigger gang.
I was with the gang split up. We had one big gang, and we went down and knocked everybody's back house down.
Uh-huh.
Then I went home. Vern went with those guys, and they went down to the railroad tracks, and they let the cattle out.
They let the cattle out.
What?
One of the cattle got killed, and RCMP the next day was visiting all the high schools, and Vern he couldn't eat for a week. He was scared.
That could have started his nerves.
He was never the same after that. He was always scared of the RCMP. But he was...
No, what happens? They went, some kids let the cattle out of the...
Yeah.
Out of the train or something?
No, the stockyard where they keep the cattle.
They have a fence with all the cattle next to it.
And they let the cattle out, and one of them died?
Well, killed by some,
Cost a lot of money.
I don't know whether they pinned it on anybody or not.
No, they
But Vern was involved. Did you know at the time that Vern was involved?
I just was suspicious. But I didn't know.
Nobody would tell anybody. That was how she was. You asked Vern about it, you know. He'll tell you.
But Vernon was very so conscientious. This is his trouble. This is how he suffers. If he had Vernon's Polly, he would fix her up. He'd turn her around. But not Vernon. He gave in. He was always loyal to her and
Vern
try
would keep
to
things
please.
to himself. He would never tell me his troubles. I'd come visit on a long weekend up there, and he would never tell me anything about Polly or
No,
anything.
no.
Everything was hunky dory with him. You know, he didn't face reality.
Is it that he didn't face reality, or that he didn't want to share? Was he always like that, even as a little boy? If he was sick, he wouldn't say anything, or
Well, he was like that.
he was quiet?
Well, I don't know. You tell me. Was I fair with you boys?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think you were fair with the boys?
Well, I'm asking him, and he
Yeah,
says yes.
When she buy a pair of pants, we both would get a pair of pants.
Yeah.
We bought shoes.
But I mean, in
We always
other
bought
words, this is one thing that I was angry, and you'll understand how it was. Vernon went to high school, and it took him longer to come for lunch. And this one was closer. He came, earlier. And I needed some milk for lunch. And I said, here, Vic, go and get some milk. And what Vic does, he stands in the corner, and Vernon's coming. He says, hey, Mom said you to get some milk. So Vernon, Mom said to get some milk. He goes to the store. And I look, it's not Vic bringing the milk, but Vernon. And I knew what happened. Well, you see how he played trick. Next time, I gave him a bottle, and I said, go in the corner and tell Vernon to bring the milk. And there was, he tricked. They started digging the garden. Well, Vernon made us line up here, and they start in the middle. But one goes that way, and this one goes. And Vernon doesn't even see that Vic made one step further. And when he turns around, his line is this, and Vernon is, and Vic's is just this wide.
I don't remember that.
So he was trying to trick Vern.
Yeah, no, sure.
Did you see a lot of competition between him and Vern?
Well, I did, but I tried to, to see that, what I noticed, Vic would think that I'm favoring Vernon because he is smart. And Vernon would think I'm favoring Vic because he is sick. And I'm in the middle. And here I try to be a good, make it even.
Must be hard having twins.
Oh. Then anything happened in the neighborhood, whoa, that's the twin Derhaks did it. Then they weren't even there.
Wow, so they got blamed for a lot of
Oh,
things.
But when I look back, I think I can give myself a credit that I did a good job raising them.
Uh, you did awesome. I mean, you did great for the circumstances.
Hmm?
I mean, you didn't have a husband.
Yeah,
Oh.
well, that was hard.
You had to raise all the kids yourself.
Yeah.
That must have been really hard. You didn't have the support of another adult in the home.
And like about that beer and something, I don't know. That worked better for me. That they let them worry, and they don't know. I like about that Slobodian. He was worrying all the time. Now, does Slobodian know or doesn't he? I talked with one school teacher, and he says, "Boy, you were a smart woman." He says, "I wish I had more parents of my students like that."
Well, you can just walk in front. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So,
She had a good sleep.
so you had to be really smart. You
Yeah.
had to use all your wits to. Now, did they do a lot of things with Nancy?
Well, they were always, poor Nancy. She was in the middle. Marty was older. He was picking on Nancy. She had blonde hair and a buck tooth,
Uh-huh.
So he'll just go like this, and she would scream. She would scream. And then they were washing dishes on the farm. And there was a boy named Walter. And there was a girl named Leon. So he would say, Walter and Leon, Walter and Leon. Well, Dad would come with almost with a stick to cut, just teasing them. Then when Marley left, then these guys were teasing her, and the two of them.
Uh-huh.
And she had an awful time. And when some guy was courting her, and you'd come in and, go to the car, and they're showing, especially this one, how that one walked and what he said and how he got in the car. And she's mad.
So they just tease her about her date.
Yeah.
Oh, guys. It's funny.
Wow. Did they ever tease you?
Who? No,
Twins.
no. Marley did.
Morley did.
Yeah. He thought he was bigger, and would be teasing me.
Must have been really hard for you though.
Mm.
With that many kids in the house.
I
We've got
remember-
one kid and that's enough for me.
I remember when we was broke near the end of the month, before the first of the month, before you got your check, you'd always make lots of put a hair.
Yeah.
We'd live on put a hair for a week.
But then when I got my check, I'd get a steak.
Oh.
That was the treat.
But see, we lived on, what was that called?
Well, it was like
Family
welfare.
allowance?
Hmm?
There was so much money for each child, wasn't it? Family
It
allowance?
was a welfare basically.
It basically was welfare.
Man, we'd scratched. And we didn't have nothing for Christmas. And the Salvation Army would bring some boxes the night before Christmas, and that's all the Christmas we would.
Well, and
Remember, they
that
saved their
lasted for
butts
about
lots of time.
2 months.
We were so
what they
poor.
bring me.
Salvation Army would save us.
When I go to town, I never mess the first cattle to throw $20.
Yeah, we do too. Well, Paul and
Yeah.
I always put money for
Yeah,
when we see them.
The Salvation Army provided you Christmas.
yeah, they always do. They give hampers.
Wow. So you weren't able to work.
No, I was
With the
so
children.
weak. I was so weak. They almost dragged me into the cemetery.
Oh, is that right?
I had a spot on the lung, where it was, but they told me, when they give you these skin tests, that Vic, he's got my blood, and he can resist and Morley. But Nancy and Vernon, they have Dad's blood, and they warned me, says those two should be very careful if they catch a cold, because they could catch TB very easy, and they wouldn't be, they couldn't resist it.
Oh, wow.
No resistance.
What's your blood?
I don't know. Now, you said he was sick a lot?
Oh yes, but he had pneumonia
I always
when he
had
was a
pneumonia
year
every
old.
winter. Every winter I got sick. I was sick all winter. Bad cold.
You know, there was
Now, Max gets sick a lot with cold too.
yeah,
But he would get pneumonia in the winter.
in the winter time.
It got to below 40 below all winter.
But Vern didn't get sick.
No, if he got sick, he got over it. He always was stronger. But when he got this pneumonia, they were a year old in October, and this happened in January. And our houses were very cold, and you had only the heater. And if the heat went out, your house is completely cold. And I was, couldn't sleep one night. They were fussing to the bathroom and that. And I slept. I didn't put them in the cribs because I couldn't handle 2 cribs. I kept them. I slept with them in bed, and covered them up. But I got exhausted. I got tired. And in my sleep, because I had my hand over him, but I turned around. When you're tired, you don't even know that you turned on the other side, and I fell asleep very deeply. And he kicked his covers off, and he was so cold that when I woke up, and he couldn't even cry, he just,
Oh, wow.
it hit him so hard. And I covered him, and I took him to my body, and I hollered to Dad, go and get the fire going. I said, this kid is freezing. And he got the fire going, and I don't know, I told him to put some hot water bottle or something, and I revived him. But he got sick, and there was I don't know what reason, that we had a health nurse that she looked and she says, he's getting pneumonia, put some mustard plaster. But what she told me, it broke a little bit, but it didn't help. And the next day, he didn't eat, didn't drink. And if anybody getting pneumonia, the eyes will get glassy. That's a definite sign. A person has pneumonia, and his eyes were so glassy. And he didn't pass water and anything. And his aunt came in, and I said, oh, if I could get a doctor right now. And Dad, when he heard that, he just went out and hitched his horses and went to a phone, because we didn't have a phone. And he went to his sister-in-law's parents. And he phoned for the doctor. And the doctor hired a cab or something, and he came. It was 20 miles, and in winter time, but the roads were good that he got there. Or maybe he had a snowmobile, I don't know how it got. Anyway, he looked at the kid and he says, he's got pneumonia. And I said, well, can you take him to the hospital? And he said, I'd love to have him in the hospital. But he says, if I take him out one breath of cold air, and he's gone. And he says, I'll tell you what to do. Have you got mustard? I said, yes. Well, give me some flour mustard. He took the jacket off and rolled his sleeves. And he put 20 teaspoons of flour. Or maybe it was tables, no teaspoons for all that. And so for a child, I forget now. I remember for the older people. Anyway, he mixed this mustard and the flour, and then real warm water, made a heavy paste, and I gave him a diaper, and he put it in the middle, covered it up, and put it on his chest. And he says, you take it off. I could put the same one, but I made fresh ones. Every 2 hours. And when you take off, you put some camphor oil so it wouldn't blister. And I started this at 6 o'clock, so I did all night, all day the next day, and all night. That was 48 hours. Nobody relieved me. I set the alarm clock so it would wake me up every hour, every 2 hours. And I changed it, and I did it. And he told me, he says, when you're finished that, write me a letter and tell me how the kid, how he acts. And this last one that I put on, I was so tired, so beat. And Dad went and made porridge, and he put it on the table, and he called me, he says, come on and eat. And I sat at the table, and I pushed that dish. I said, I don't want this soup. And he just came, and I remember he picked me up, and he put me on the couch and put a cover over me, and I went dead to the world and fell asleep.
Wow.
And the baby was better, and he went to the sister-in-law, and I don't know whether she came or her girl, and changed him, and all he would take is orange juice, but he wouldn't take any milk, but he took orange juice. And I woke up maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this was 6 o'clock in the morning. And where am I? I'm all dressed, and I didn't know what time of the day it was or anything. So overtired. And then, they didn't walk yet. They were just trying to, but they were crawling. And Vernon, he had a little bit of cold, but he was all right. And he started to walk. And this one, I'm holding him just like a little doll. He was much bigger than that baby, when he got so weak. And he is watching Vernon. Watching, and he wanted to go. Oh, and I he slid on the floor and collapsed. He can't stand. So I carried him another week like that, and I think it was Dad that was holding him and carrying him. And I know it was Sunday, and here Vernon is almost running by now, you know. So he just, pushed himself down, and he got hold of the chair, and then he stood himself, and then he took a hold of his hair, and he's walking.
Now, who took his hair?
Dad, that's how he walked.
He taught himself to walk.
That's so funny.
So you see, he had his tricks.
So he was determined to walk.
Yeah. And then when they were walking and towards spring, he got something, I don't know, against Vernon, that anything he get hold, he would hit Vernon. And I heard the story. They said that twins, when they get such a one would get so mean to the other, you had to separate them. And I thought, well, and all I did, I would watch him. He comes and hit him, and I hit him on the head, and he turned around. Then he goes, and then and I watched that. I gave him a whack every time he hit Vernon. And then he got over it.
Wasn't Vern the big one, though? Wasn't Vern bigger?
No, well, he was a little plump here. Even now, well, now that he put on weight, but Vic, he was like you. And Vernon was, a standard. But then when they were friendly again, they would be whispering. They got their own language. And we don't know what they're saying. And they know what we're saying, but we don't know what they're saying. And then they're whispering. They're not whispering in the ear, but lip to lip.
And so they would talk to each other, no one
Yeah.
understood them.
And that was a heartbreak for Dad, because, at 4 years, they were just, the time that you can enjoy them, because they would say something funny, and then they would, And we had you remember when they were drilling the well?
What's
Oh,
this?
you must have remembered something.
No? What happened?
Well, they were drilling the well in winter time, and they put dynamite and just like the big drill with the engine. And kids, they want to watch. So they told them to go away. There was like a hen coop, a building, and they would stand and watch them. But the men, like on the farm, they want to go to the washroom. Well, they just go anywhere behind the barn, And I noticed that the men were chasing them. They followed the men, and the men were chasing them. And I guessed what happened. They didn't want the kids, look. So the next day, I gave them a lecture. I said, when they called everybody uncle, and I said, when those uncles go behind there, don't follow them. I saw them chasing you. Well, why do they go? And I said, well, I'll explain what to go. They go to do their business, and they don't want. And I said, don't follow them. Okay. Well, Vic still wants to go, and Vernon says, Vic, don't go. Do you know that those uncles want to pee? So you can't win.
I only remember Dad 2 times. I remember one time that we was on top of the hay wagon, and somehow Maury got the team going too fast, and he tipped the hay over, and we were all buried underneath the hay, and Dad really gave Maury a licking. Doing that. And then I remember one time when we were playing outside, and Dad told us to get in the car, and we went to the town, and he bought some Cracker Jacks for us, and you were looking all over for us, you couldn't find us, and he just laughed about it.
Well, I remember that, clearly, that you were I sent you for wood, to bring in the house. And Dad, he motioned to me, and he showed that he's taking you in the car. And I waved, that's all right. But when Dad says come in the car, and they dropped the wood and got the car, and in the car they say to Dad, Mama's waiting for the wood, and we didn't bring it. You know, they're getting. And he brought him, and Dad made that story. He says, "Boy, the mother should be worrying where you went." And he said, "Yeah, you know." And here I knew that they went, but you know, the kids they made such a big deal of it.
Oh, okay. So when they got back, they thought that you didn't know where they were.
Yeah. And I pretended, and I said, "Where did you go? Why didn't you tell me?" "Well, Dad told us to get in the car."
And he didn't know.
But Dad was a nice guy. I remember that.
You remember that he was nice.
Another thing I remember was there was something hanging up on the side of the garage or barn or something. Fell and hit me here, and I still got a scar here.
I don't remember.
Remember, I got hurt real bad. You thought I was going to die. Got hit
Well, you know, Dad was so particular about his garage. It was an old thing, but you know, he had a like a, what do you call it? Well, he was a work table. You know,
yeah, a bench.
A bench, yeah. And he would put all his tools, you know, and I had this hammer for this and that and that and that. And if somebody used it, he'd know that he didn't put it right. Well, there was another hammer in the barn hung on a nail. And whenever I needed a hammer, I went to the barn instead of the garage. But he was accusing me. He says, "When you go into that garage, why don't you put the hammer and the things where they were?" And I said, "Well, what's wrong with you? I never go to garage. Why should I? If I need I take from the..." "Well, who did it?" "Well, who did it?" I said, "I don't know." And he told me a few times, he says that I do something in the garage. But he was uptown, came home late, and I was giving him lunch. And these guys are running to the barn and to the garage, you know, they look like little weasels. And you know, this door didn't have a lock, but it had a board that, you know, put behind another
latch,
board, and it was too high for them to open that way. But the bottom was kind of loose. And I looked out the window, and I don't know whether it was Vic or Vernon. One sits on the floor, on the ground, and pulls that board and makes a hole there. And the other one goes in, takes the hammer, and out they go behind the barn. And I said, "Look to Dad." I said, "See what's happening? And you're accusing me about that hammer?" Well, he says, "Let's go and see what they do with that hammer." And they take a bunch of nails, and there was a fence post, you know, by the pig pen. And you know, the post is soft on the top.
Mm-hmm.
And they were hammering nails that they covered that post with nails.
Oh no.
The whole top of the post.
Huh?
The whole top.
The whole top. As many nails as they couldn't push in.
I remember the smoke shed where you had the fish drying.
Yeah.
With red pepper. Boy, that was good fish.
Yeah, that was
And
good.
we
And
used
the smoked ham and
We used to have
everything.
meat in there. Oh, that was good.
And
You don't buy
kobasa.
that in the store anymore.
I don't know.
That was good. I remember one time when I caught those fish,
But yeah, you tell about it.
I was only about 3 years old.
You were 3 years old and you caught some
You know, in the
fish.
springtime, the fish would go into a little channel, couldn't get out.
No, this was, you know, like water would go into a little shallow
Well, that's
place,
what I
and
said.
it's full of leaves, you know, fall leaves. And we didn't know until he discovered that they jump from the water into this shallow, and they lay on their back, and the sun is shining, and they're sleeping there. And this guy would come around sneaking and catch it by, you know, by the neck and pull out. And he was saying that he catching fish with his hands, and we thought, well, that was stupid. So one Sunday, he says, "You want to see how I catch fish?" This Uncle Max and, you know, Dad, we all go. He told us to keep quiet, and he goes around there, you know, and catches this fish with the hands.
I was about 3 years old.
Oh my
And he was only 3 years old.
Yeah.
god.
Wow.
I remember when Uncle Steve's boys would jump off into the river and swim with no clothes on. Remember that?
They would go skinny dipping.
And then remember
there was
that.
a little creek that ran right next to. See, there was a road, and Uncle Steve's farm was on this side, and our farm was on the other side of the road. There was this creek, Fishing River Creek, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Ran
No,
right
that
there.
was Mink Creek.
Mink Creek.
Fishing River was at Fishing River town.
So did your husband play a lot with the boys
Oh yes.
all the time,
Oh yeah.
constantly?
Well, when he come, when they were little, it didn't matter whether it was Nancy or Morley when they were small, and then these, and they run to him, and he would catch by the hand, and then he would swing and sing like a folk song. He'd always have this little dance with them every time he came into the house, and then there was the twins.
Oh, that's cute.
Or to catch them and throw them up in the air. And,
You don't remember any of that?
Oh.
and one time in summertime, we sat on the steps outside the kitchen. And they were running on the road and then on the bridge, on the road that went to the bridge, and come back. And Dad said he counting. He says, "Well, go once more." But in Manitoba, when the sun goes down, it gets dark right away.
Yeah.
And here the sun was down, it's getting dark. So they went maybe 3 times, and it's getting real dark. And he says, "Well, go once more." And they're scared because it's really getting dark. "Well, go once more." And Vernon turned around and he says, "Well, can't you wait till tomorrow morning?" He didn't know, they didn't know why he made them go, but he wanted to see how long they'll go.
Sleeping too much.
Gotta wake her up. Well, I guess we can have a break.
Oh,